Passover, Feast of Firstfruits, counting the Omer, Shavuot. That's a lot of big words. What's it all about? It's real important. Stick around. There's a big part of me, I must admit, that kind of wishes I grew up in Jerusalem. I'm a lover of Jesus, no doubt about it. And I don't want to do any of these feast days without Jesus being the central part of it. But there's a sense in which it would have gotten in my blood. I would have done it year by year. It would have been very normal to me. You see, in my life, growing up as an American, I got it in my blood. I kind of know when St. Patrick's Day is going to happen, Valentine's Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas, all that stuff's in my blood. Nothing's very complicated. I've just lived it so many times. It's like totally natural for me. Well, if you were a little Israeli kiddo, well, it would be supernatural for them. And so all this stuff that I think when I was growing up, like all this Jewish stuff, I'd look at that and go, ooh, that is really difficult. No, it's not difficult. I just didn't grow up with it. Now, not only that, you have rabbinic Judaism, so there's a lot of add-on stuff, tradition stuff, but then there's the stuff that's just in the Bible. And what I've been trying to tell people is that if we do just what God tells us to do, it's really not all that difficult. Now, a couple weeks ago, if you haven't watched it already, it's basically Passover Basics for Christians. You probably should watch that first, and this is the follow-up video, because now that you've done Passover, and now that you have started the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and you know what that 7 days is about, like, now what? When did Jesus raise? Now, that's what this video is about. So anyway, here's the way it kind of looks. In Leviticus 23, you'll want to read that. You also need to read in its entirety Deuteronomy chapter 16. But let me just kind of start us out with Leviticus 23:9. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land which I'm going to give to you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest." Well, here's the way it kind of looks. Passover happens on different days of the week, depending on the year. So let's just say that Passover happens on a Wednesday night. And then on Thursday, that would be the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first day. And then you would hit a Sabbath after that. That would be the seventh day, or for us, Saturday. And then the very day after that is the Feast of First Fruits. So that would be a Sunday. It's on a Sunday every year. Now, I must admit that there is a bit of discrepancy between Jewish thought on that, but I'm going to side with what's called the Karaite Jews. And I think it's just there in Scripture. But Karaite, K-A-R-A-I-T-E, Karaite means those Jewish folks who do not follow rabbinic Judaism, but just try to stick with the Bible and the Bible alone. I learned a lot from those guys. I really wish they knew Jesus, but I learned a lot from those guys. Anyway, on that first day, that would be a Sunday, the first day after the first Sabbath, Sunday, then you start counting the Omer. Now, this is the day that Jesus resurrects from the dead. Oh my gosh, be still my heart. Now, here's the thing. When you read in Leviticus 23, it doesn't seem like a lot of emphasis is put on the Feast of First Fruits. But let me tell you, it's a really big deal. And here's part of the reason the emphasis doesn't seem to be there, and that is it's a work day. But here's what people have got to understand, is that First Fruits is not a standalone holy day. That is the beginning, the genesis, the start of the spark that goes down this long line of 50 days to Pentecost. And what happened at Pentecost? Well, two things. Thing number one, the Torah was given. Yahweh's instruction in righteousness that we might follow it. But without the Spirit, we're just doing the letter of the law. But what was given at Pentecost? The Spirit. That the Torah would begin to be written on our hearts, and we read the Scriptures, then we begin to follow it, not because we have to, but because the Spirit is now in us, with the circumcised heart, pressing us, compelling us to do those things that glorify the narrative of our King Jesus. You see how that works? So here's what it looks like. On First Fruits, you can read the text, and you don't need to do the sacrifice part. There is no tabernacle. It would be unlawful to do that. But, be that as it may, just know this, that Jesus is our sacrifice. But we can do the other things in a commemorative sort of way. You can look at it. I mean, I've had everything from like fake barley from Michael's that I've brought to a gathering, and we would reflect on Jesus and his resurrection. But here's the thing. Remember, it's a work day. But 50 days later is not a work day. Because when Jesus rose, this is a work day for God. He's raising Jesus from the dead. And here's another thing I think, is that the reason, Passover, this is an anomaly to God. Death is the anomaly. And it's, a time to pause, okay? For us, it's a normal thing. For God, it's an anomaly. But, you see, God, boom, 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 God brings everything to life, life, life. And so when Jesus raises from the dead, to us, it's like, woo! But to God, this is just what God does. It's a work day. So we still need to stop, and we need to totally appreciate that Jesus raised from the dead, because if Jesus didn't raise from the dead, our faith is nothing. We might as well pack up and go home. But here's what we do. Now what we do is we count to 50. All of us as a Christian community. And so we count to 50, but we do it in a very unusual way. Here's the way it kind of works. Leviticus 23:15. You shall also count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day when you brought in the sheaf of the wave offering, there shall be 7 complete Sabbaths. Now, if you continue on, essentially what's happening there is we're counting 7 weeks or 7 sevens, so up to 49. And so when I count, it basically looks like this. Today is the first day of the first week of the counting of the Omer. And then the next day. This is the second day of the first week of the counting of the Omer. And then on the fifth day of the first week of the counting of the Omer. And we do that 7 times. And then when we get to the 8th day, we don't say 8th day. Instead, what we do is we say, this is the first day of the second week of the counting of the Omer. And we do that 7 times. Now, I think this is important for a number of reasons. You see, as God trains us and teaches us to press into his narrative of rest and reliance and exalting of Jesus, when we do that weekly Sabbath all year long, we are resting in our Messiah. We are putting our wedding ring because the Sabbath is a sign, but we're also demonstrating to the world that Hebrews 4 is a reality to all of us, and we're going to say no to the busyness of the world, and we're going to rest in our Messiah. See how that works? But then, once a year, we count 7 sevens, where we now press into the narrative of Jesus' death, resurrection, moving on to that Jesus is the first fruit, but then there would be a complete harvest 50 days later, and that would be all of us. Oh my, that's just amazing. And so we'll go into that season, and then this is reflective also of a bigger kind of cosmological thing. And so take a look sometime at Leviticus 25, where you have now years. You have 6 years and then a Sabbath year. It's called a Shemini year. And then you do that 7 times. And then on the 50th year, a Jubilee or a Yovel is declared. Jesus talks about this. And then ultimately, Yeshua is going to return. And oh my gosh. And by the way, today happens to be March 20th. We're right in the middle of this coronavirus thing. We're going to remember this for a long time, so I don't mind talking about it. You know what? I don't know when Yeshua is going to return, but when he does, here's what I hope for you. I can do like all types of prophecy teaching, but really what I want to focus on is I want to be in love with my Messiah. I want to be the type of virgin that the lamp is filled, and I want to be caught being obedient. I want to be caught doing those things that God has given us to do, that we might glorify Jesus and press into his kingdom. That's what I want to be about. So anyway, it's important that we know that what we're doing there. And it's important for pastors to teach the flock. This is how you press into God's narrative. And when we do that, we glorify Jesus. Yeah, that's what we need to be about. So anyway, you count 7 times 7. Now, I've had to be creative. Again, we don't live in an agrarian society. And so one year, me and my sons, we put together a tabernacle, like a model. We spent like 2 or 3 months on it. And then my son, right next to the bronze altar in the courtyard, he put a Star of David. I don't know why he wanted to do a Star of David. He just decided to because we wanted to know where north, south, east, west. We used the points on the star to do that. And what we did is we took beans and we put 1 bean in for the first day, 2 beans in for the second day, and we grouped them in 7. We did that for the 50-day counting. So we did it that way one year. One year, I did a group text with my family, and I started counting just like I told you. Today is the first day of the first week of the counting of the Omer, and I just did it. And then each day what I did was I waited longer into the day to send that text. And what I did was I wait longer to see which one of my children and little extended family would send the text first. And the first one who did it, I said, congratulations, you got $5. And then what I did was, so you got to see this picture here too, is there's events that happen from the Passover and Exodus all the way up to the giving of the Torah. And so, the giving of the manna and quail and the water from the rock. And so during those, the counting, I would try to guesstimate best I could, and I would tell little stories to my kids. And so I would ask them questions. And when I asked them questions, sometimes I would say, hey, the first one who can answer this, I'm going to give you a gift card to Dutch Bros or something like that. Just little tiny stuff that I could afford that would make this interesting and fun. We do that with our holidays as we know it, right? We have cocoa and stuff. And I wanted to do something as a father to make this exciting for my kids. All right, you get the idea. Just be creative in how you do it. But you as a parent need to decide how in the world can we get this into our kids and make it normal for them. Well, anyway, you get up to that 50th day and you have a Shavuot or Pentecost. The Spirit is given. And there, that is special because what was of the letter is now of the Spirit. And so when I do the feast days, I'm not returning back to do letter of the law. No, I do it because I'm in love. I'm in love with my Messiah. I want to follow my King. And when we get to Shavuot or Pentecost, we have these 2 loaves. Read about it. 2 loaves. No one's really sure what these 2 loaves mean exactly. Is it Jew and Gentile? Is it Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom? I don't know. But here's what I know is important. One day, our one Messiah is going to bring under one King, Jesus, all people that have chosen to follow the Lamb, whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. And we will have the Torah written on our hearts, and we'll begin to follow our Messiah. All right, you can tell I get excited about this stuff. Well, that's enough for this week. I'll see you next week.